What up, people? My name is Batman, and if you haven't heard of Titanfall yet, what you need to know is that it's going to be one of the main FPS competitors coming right out of the gate on the new-gen consoles. And the more footage and the more gameplay I see of Titanfall, the more I start to think that the COD era is coming to a close, that the monolithic, oversaturated beast that is Call of Duty is swiftly approaching its end, an end that will be delivered to it in a justice-filled manner by Titanfall. To understand Titanfall, you have to first realize it's made by the same people who literally invented Call of Duty, and they personally developed COD 4 and MW2. Now, the situation with the Infinity Ward Activision lawsuit is still kind of murky to me. This morning I read a Game Informer article about Titanfall, which made it sound like after MW2 came out, the heads of IW, Vince Zampella and Jason West, they basically wanted more creative control over Call of Duty, which I believe would also mean a lot more money in royalties. And while they were negotiating this with Activision, something happened that pissed off Activision so bad that they fired the two guys. And literally, it was like a scene from the movies. Like, security came up and escorted these guys who had just labored over MW2 for a year out of the building. And I know people will fall on either side of this argument. Like, some people do back up Activision and they argue that Zampella and West were being greedy. But I gotta tell you, I'm firmly with Zampella and West. If for nothing else, simply because 46 of the IW employees who worked under the Infinity Ward also quit in protest. They felt so strongly that Activision was in the wrong that they gave up secure, high-paying positions in a very successful studio. That says a lot to me. Eventually, both sides sued each other and all the cases were settled out of court, which basically means everyone, for the most part, had a happy ending financially. Of those 46 IW employees who quit, 38 followed Zampella and West to their new development studio, Respawn Entertainment, the studio now working on Titanfall. So, the way I see it, IW today is not the same at all as IW back in 2010. It's a completely different studio, except for the name. So, you know, yesterday at the Ghost reveal, when the head of Activision was listing off all these IW accomplishments over the years, with, you know, Call of Duty 4 and MW2, was kind of dishonest, because the people who did those things aren't there anymore. It would be like today's 49ers, their players taking credit for all the Super Bowls the team won in the early 90s. You know, it just doesn't make sense. However, the Super Bowl studio that was Infinity Ward is now Respawn Entertainment. It's the same leadership, Zampella and West, and for the most part, the same development team, from writers to programmers. And so, I would argue if you liked Call of Duty 4 or MW2 or Call of Duty in general, which was their idea from the beginning, you will probably like Titanfall. The Infinity Ward of 2010, now Respawn Entertainment, was and remains a bold development team, and this team has had a significant and lasting impact on the shooter genre as a whole on several occasions. Customizable classes with customizable perks was their idea, implemented first in COD 4, and every single FPS multiplayer game since then, even Halo and Battlefield, has adopted some sort of customizable class and perk system. Kill streaks were their idea, first implemented in COD 4 and taken to its logical extreme in MW2. Now, not every FPS game since then has adopted the streak system, but most of them have. Halo, Homefront, Crysis, Medal of Honor. And obviously Call of Duty, the #1 FPS franchise worldwide, has been defined by the streak system. It was COD 4 and MW2 that really put COD on top, changed the dynamic from a top FPS shooter to the top FPS shooter. And I would argue that was largely because of the streak system, this uber-intense rewards and incentive system that speaks directly to the most primitive parts of our mind. The former Infinity Ward, now Respawn Entertainment, changed the FPS genre in its entirety permanently. And they are the development team that put Call of Duty on top. You know, I'll give Treyarch Zombies, that's a nifty idea on their part, but as far as multiplayer goes, all they've been able to do is fine-tune the grand ideas that were Infinity Wards, and then they fired the guys. Well, I suspect that OG IW is back with a vengeance as Respawn Entertainment, a thirst for blood of the corporate basilisk that squeezed them out for the sake of greed. So, there are a few reasons why I think Titanfall is going to conquer Call of Duty. For starters, like I just said, we know the developers at Respawn Entertainment are intense, groundbreaking innovators. Now, on top of all these intense innovation skills we know they possess, they've been given full creative control this time. Along with a blank page start, they don't have to build off a previous COD title. They get to form this motherfucker entirely in their own eyes. And then you combine these factors with the fact that this is all being done on the brand new next-gen tech. And, you know, things are looking pretty exciting here. And maybe this is a bit bold, but I won't be surprised if Titanfall alters the FPS genre in general. Again, as the former IW, now Respawn Entertainment, has already done several times. And from what we've seen, I think it's actually fairly evident the impact that Titanfall is going to have on the FPS multiplayer genre in its entirety. This is the beginning of the end for the FPS single-player campaign. Now, Respawn says they're not putting in a campaign because they didn't have the time or manpower to build it. And granted, they are small and new, and campaigns take a lot of work, so this could very well be true, but I suspect that even if they had the time and manpower, they wouldn't have made a campaign anyways, because the other thing that campaigns require a lot of is memory. The campaign is like the ugly friend that multiplayer has to bring to the bar. And I don't want to upset anyone with that claim. Like, I realize a lot of people love campaigns, and look, I love campaigns too. You know, I didn't get Xbox Live till 2009, and before that I had like 15,000 gamer score on just campaigns. But I was in a minority of consumers for whom gaming was a serious hobby. Fact of the matter is, for games like Call of Duty, and Call of Duty especially, FPS multiplayer games in general, the average consumer isn't going to even touch the campaign, and if they do, they rarely finish it, and there's statistical evidence to support that claim. And that's one of the main things Respawn mentions when discussing their lack of a campaign, is that based on focus group research, plenty of which I'm sure these guys had access to back at Activision when they had millions of dollars to thoroughly research their millions of fans, based on that research, they know that the campaign isn't going to be touched. Because the campaign is long, and multiplayer matches by themselves are quick, and the casual consumer, where not all, but a majority of the profits come from, wants quick. Think of how highly successful Twitter and Vine have been, 140 characters or 7 seconds. People want fast and short. They want to be restricted. We're the ADD generation, baby. And that's not to say this applies to all single-player campaigns ever. Games like Borderlands, Dead Space, and Mass Effect all have incredible campaigns and will continue to build on those. But that's because those games put 100% of their effort and game memory into their campaigns. They aren't trying to simultaneously build a multiplayer experience as well, and I think it shows. A campaign like Mass Effect or Borderlands is a million times more in-depth and replayable than your typical Call of Duty campaign. Like, speaking as a hardcore gamer, I've beaten both Mass Effect 3 and Borderlands 2 twice, but I don't play the COD campaigns anymore. And keep in mind, I had 960 gamer score on COD 4 and the full 1K on MW2, but the COD campaigns aren't fun, because for the most part, they are very scripted and very linear. And I know Treyarch has, been trying to take some steps to make the campaign more replayable, but I don't think they've had that much success. Your second playthrough is generally going to look very similar to your first, as was certainly true with MW3 and every COD before that. And I almost feel like if you've played one COD campaign, you've played them all. You know what changes? The cinematic sequences, like where you're in a helicopter or on a fucking horse or whatever. Now, this is not the case with a game like Borderlands or Mass Effect. Your second playthrough, the enemies you fight, when you fight them, and how you fight them can all be distinctly different in a new playthrough. And that's because the developers have put the full weight of their power, 100% of their game memory, resources, and energy into perfecting that specific campaign experience. And my point is that this is exactly what Respawn Entertainment is going to do with Titanfall, just in the opposite direction. They're going to devote 100% of their game memory, resources, and manpower to multiplayer, which has never been done before in a major title. And just as Call of Duty campaigns can't stack up against a Mass Effect campaign, so too will the COD multiplayer fail to stack up against the Titanfall multiplayer. And what I suspect will happen is that as more and more developers realize that they have to choose between either having a decent multiplayer with a decent campaign or just having an incredible multiplayer, you're going to see more and more FPS studios opt out of campaign altogether. But of course, this is all theory. If you agree or disagree, there is a comment section below. Please remember to rate the video and follow me on Twitter for all that 140 character sweet stuff. This is Batman signing out.
This is farming at its best. Seems like the crops seem to be in season right now, man.
Maybe on standby. Package inbound.
Oh.